Should you purchase an Inmotion V14 Vs or an Inmotion V11Y? What is my thoughts about these two, even when I still own a V11? If you want to know that and much more, stay tuned until the end of this video. Inmotion have sent to me these two electric unicycles to give my thoughts about it for you guys, and I've been riding electric unicycles and Inmotion wheels for a long period of time. I have over 40,000 miles on my legs, and my first electric unicycle from Inmotion was the V8F. And I still have basically everything. I have two V12s, I have two V11s, I have the V14. I have basically almost all the wheels that they have released in the last couple of years. If you are looking for their new gens, they are very good wheels, but quite in a different way. Let me talk about fun. And that's a big subject for me, because when you jump into an electric unicycle, you like to be free. You like to feel that the wheel is just an extension of your body. And I have to say to you guys that that's a massive point for the Inmotion V11Y. It's a very funny wheel, is very enjoyable to ride, is already quite fast, not at that level. This feels completely different, and it doesn't feel like an electric unicycle, and we'll go there in a second. But if you want fun, and if you want to feel connected, and if you want to have something that is easy to ride, definitely it's easy to understand that that point goes to the Inmotion V11Y. When we talk about the handle, I have to give a massive point to the Inmotion V11. It's still my favorite handle, and it's very, very sturdy. Something that Inmotion bring to us until obviously the E20. And the handle here, it's a bit flimsy. So let me just turn it on, and as you can see, it's not the same quality, but until today I never had any issues with it. It works fine, but obviously moving something with 40 kilos, I think that Inmotion could have done much better than the handle that you'll find on the Inmotion 1450S. When we talk about batteries and speeds and stuff like that, obviously that's a massive point to the Inmotion V1450S, because here you can see the battery, you can see the mode that you are riding, you can see how fast you are riding. But when we look to the Inmotion V11Y, you have just a small screen with the amount of battery that you have. But now you have a new add-on that I really like, is when you reach the maximum speed and you look to that screen, you have like a small sign in red letting you know that, yeah, what you felt on your feet or that sound that you hear is definitely because you are reaching the top speed, so definitely a plus. And when we talk about speeds, it's not even a fight, because here on the Inmotion V11Y you can do 55 kilometers, and when you go to the Inmotion V1450S you can do 70 kilometers. So if you are like me and you normally ride up to 68 kilometers per hour, you have plenty of space with the Inmotion V1450S. In the other hand, when I'm on the Inmotion V11Y, I'm a bit limited. And if you have to do a big distance and is a big trip, you can feel that when you are coming back, even if you can come back and that is not really a problem, you can feel that the wheel is always beeping and pushing you more backwards than it was when you were going in that direction. So definitely something that I don't like so much, and something that I was not used to feel on the Inmotion V11, because obviously normally on that wheel you could just ride at 55 kilometers per hour on the first 20%. And when we look to this one, it allows you to do that basically during the time that you are riding with it. But like I said, when you are reaching more towards the end, it's going to happen more often. That is just pulling you up and basically protecting you from cutting off much often than it was on the predecessor of the Inmotion V11Y. When we talk about the front lights, they are exactly the same, but they have something that is really different. And I'm talking about how much you can tilt that light up. And I find that on the Inmotion V11Y is a bit limited. And when we look to the Inmotion V1450S, I can point it much higher. So definitely a plus, and something that I really like on this one. Yeah, I always prefer to point a little bit higher, because I ride these things on redways, so basically there is no lights whatsoever, and I like to point it a little bit further up because I'm not blinding anyone. When we look to the tire, it's a big difference. I have swapped the tire. I have a Michelin City Pro on my Inmotion V11Y, and I love Michelin tires. If you never tried, if you never had put one, I definitely recommend you to try because they have a massive amount of grip. But because I ride this all year and sometimes it's basically snowing, I need to have a solution that have more grip, and the Inmotion V14 Vs can deliver that. But because the profile is so different, so when we look to the V14 Vs, is a wheel that have a profile more round, so the tire is more round, and the Michelin City Pro is more in V shape, it's going to be much easier and much more nimble on the Inmotion V11Y than it is on the V14 Vs. And the reason why I'm debating to change this tire is also because I always like a wheel that is super nimble. So I will prefer to change the profile of this tire to something more in V, because it will allow me to have more control over the Inmotion V14 Vs. So when we talk about the pedals that comes included on the Inmotion V11Y and the Inmotion V14 Vs, it's like a draw, and I will explain you why. So when we look to the original pedals of the Inmotion V11Y, that is these ones, I love them, but I hate them more than the original ones of the 14 Vs. So let me explain. You have almost no grip whatsoever, but because of the thickness of these pedals are thicker than the ones that you'll find on the V14 Vs, I could do a hack where I have extra grips in metal that I can screw, and when they are gone I can unscrew and put new ones. So definitely a plus in here. These ones, they have much more grip, so you can use them no matter what, but when they start to disappear, because the pedal is so thin compared to that one, you will not be able, I don't think that you are able to do the hack that I've done to the Inmotion V11Y. So if I have to choose between the two, I'll prefer to do the hack. So in other words, I prefer the pedals on the Inmotion V11Y. So when we look to the sides of the wheels and we talk about the surface to attach your power pads, I have to give a massive point to the Inmotion V14 Vs because it's completely flat, and Inmotion gives you a plate that you can attach on top of your battery, so in other words, more protection. And because it's completely flat, it means that the Velcro that you put on the wheel and on your power pads, it will not come off, something that happens constantly on the Inmotion V11 or V11Y, something that I simply hated, and is happening here, as you can see. So I definitely prefer this solution, and I think that in the future Inmotion needs to think a little bit more about this. Also, just another thing that I forgot about the pedals is the fact that the pedals here I have swapped to pedals from E-Rides. So if you want to purchase them, you have links on the description below. They'll be cheaper and they are simply amazing, and they work super well here. And we'll talk about an extra upgrade that I've done to this wheel, because this wheel have a problem that used to happen with the V11. When we talk about lifting up these wheels, I have to give that point obviously to the Inmotion V11Y. First of all, it's much lighter. You just have one handle here that you can grab with one hand and lift it up, so definitely a plus. You have a cut switch on the bottom, so much easier, because when you are on the Inmotion V14 Vs, you need to turn off the wheel to after being able to lift it up, and in this case you have these two handles. But that gives you an extra point to the Inmotion V14 Vs, because having this handle on the front allows you to grab it and pull it backwards if you need to do an emergency brake, so definitely a plus on the Inmotion V14 Vs. So when we talk about extra protections for your wheel, I have to say that Inmotion went much further down the line than other companies. So here on the Inmotion V11Y, they have basically provide this extra protection in rubber in the front light and in the back lights, something that we were doing basically by ourselves by 3D printing, so definitely a plus. But when we look to the Inmotion V14 Vs, that's a big plus to this wheel, because you have extra bits that you have out of the box. So if these ones, they are completely snapped, they are broken, you'll be able to replace with the ones that comes inside the box, and you will not have to spend extra money to do it. So definitely a point to the Inmotion V14 Vs. So when we talk about charging, I have to give basically more points towards the V14 50S than towards the V11Y. First of all, I prefer that the ports are on the top, so it's easier for you to reach and to charge. Second, the ports here, and you have two charging ports in both, so you can do like a fast charging in both of them if you want to use two chargers. But these ones, the charging plugs are much larger and much beefier, so in other words you have less risk of breaking them, and that happens already three times already on the Inmotion V11Y. So be careful where you put the wheel to charge, because if the wheel just falls, you are going to break those charging ports, not on the wheel but on the charger, and obviously a charger will cost you maybe $50 or $60, so have that in consideration. I have to give 1 point to the Inmotion V11Y because the charge is much smaller, and because the battery is smaller also it will charge faster than this one, because the charger that comes out of the box with the Inmotion V14 50S is a massive chunk of size for charging a wheel at 3 amps. I don't get it, and I hope that in future wheels Inmotion have that in consideration if they give us such a big charger to at least give us 5 amps. When we talk about Mudguard, that's a massive point to the Inmotion V11Y and any recent wheels from Inmotion besides the V14 50S. It's not a problem, it's a hard one and it's a good plastic material. It's not like a big odd wheel that you hit slightly and you break it, so I'm not concerned about that. But I'm so used to this rubber material that if it hits it doesn't break, it just bends, that I hoped to see that on the V14 50S. Just a small con, but just something that I prefer this type of material, because even if it hits you, this doesn't really hurt, but that kind of plastic can hurt you, so definitely a plus for this one. Since we are talking about the Mudguard, we can talk about this stand that, to be honest, I find it completely useless on the Inmotion V11Y, but it works super well on the V14 50S. Plus, if you decide to put an off-road tire on the V11Y, never use it, because if you turn on and this is basically stuck in there, it's going to basically fry your motherboard, so have that in consideration. Suspension. I have to say that Inmotion have done a massive upgrade on the suspension that you'll find on the V11Y. I used to love obviously the suspension on the V11 when it came out, because it was the first wheel that came to the market with suspension, but it was not so good. You'll damage quite fast. The lube on the inside was not really high quality, but the suspension that you find now on the V11Y is like night and day. They look exactly the same, but they feel completely different, so have that in consideration. It's really an upgrade compared to the predecessor. But when we look here, obviously it's not comparable. This suspension, you don't have to basically fill it up with air, and when we talk about filling it up the V11Y, you know, it continued the same problem that it was with the previous generation, because you have to take screws to reach here on the top. You have to basically also fill up from the bottom. It's a long process and you have to do that often. And in here you don't have air, so it's just a coil, so you have much less maintenance, so definitely a plus and a massive point to the Inmotion V14 50S. So now let's address a big elephant in the room that Inmotion used to have and they restart having again. When we talk about, and if we go back in time, the Inmotion V11, the pedals, they were really high. So it will take you a while to get used to, after you get used to, but it's never the most comfortable situation to jump on top of it, because if you are like me and you are quite a short person, it's quite a big step. So something that I don't like so much, and obviously if you are a new rider, it's going to take you longer to learn. So they learned the lesson, and when they released, for example, the Inmotion V12, they found a solution that you could attach in different heights if you want and if you need it, depending on your specific situation. So if you want to go off-road, you want your pedals to be higher. But if you go on the street, you want that the pedals are lower because you have more stability and you can go faster, and so on and so on. Inmotion have sorted out on the V11Y is amazing. I really like the distance between the pedals and the floor. But Inmotion, unfortunately, when they released the Inmotion V14 50S, they forgot what they've done with the 12, and it seems that they have learned again how to do it on the V11Y. So the pedals on the V14 50S, they feel too high. To sort this out, you need to buy an upgrade that is almost perfect, because to get really the sensation that I want, I also have to low down the PSI on the tire of the V14 50S. So in here I prefer to ride with 21-22 PSI max, because it's going to make that the tire is a little bit lower. And obviously that's a big reason why I want to swap the tire, because if you go to something that is like a street tire, because the rubber is not so thick, you'll be also closer to the floor. And if I choose something that is more in V, I'll be able to reduce the sensation of weight that you get on a wheel like the V14 50S. I'm not so happy about obviously this tire, but I can see the benefit of having when it will rain a lot or when it's basically snowing. Definitely this is the wheel that I'm going to take to work. But you have a way to sort this out, is by investing a bit of your money and buying this adapter for your pedals that I have installed on my V14 50S from eRides. And by the way, thank you so much eRides to send me that, because you have sorted kind of the problem that I have with the V14 50S. And I think the big reasons why other YouTubers, they didn't like to ride electric unicycles, or in this case they didn't like so much to use the V14 50S. And I definitely recommend Inmotion to have that in consideration for the future. Trying to find a tire profile that is a little bit more in V, maybe even that the rubber is not so thick as the tire profile that you choose to put in here. Plus, I would like to see options that you can change the heights of your pedals. That's what eRides is basically giving to us with this adapter that you'll put on the V14 50S. That makes a massive difference, but like I said before, you need also to change the PSI of your tire, because if you put a PSI of 38, 40, you'll have the tire really hard, so you'll be even more further away from the floor, and it will be harder for you to jump on it, and you'll feel more the weight of your wheel, if it makes sense. That's something to have in consideration, and to see what type of pressure that you want, because I try multiple pressures on this tire, and obviously if you go to something like 17 PSI, that yes, I don't really recommend you to ride like that, because you have more chances to damage your rim. Even if this one is much more beefy than previous generations, I will avoid to do that. But if you go to something at least 21 PSI, if you don't do jumps and if you just use it on the roads like I do, you'll be more than fine. The last thing that I want to talk is about this upgrade that I have in here. It is a massive horn that I have installed from PitZoom. It's super powerful, and it's like a horn of a car. I have the control on my backpack, so it's easier to use it. Obviously when it's raining is not the best solution. It's not perfect, and we'll do the full review of it in the near future, but it's super loud. Hear this. My God. I can go much faster in safety, because obviously I can allow people to know that I'm coming, and they definitely look. With other solutions from PitZoom, it helped me, but not at the extent that I was expecting. But this one is a monster, and it works super well, and the battery on this is insane, and it will last you for a long period of time. But there is a massive con, but we'll talk that in another video. So now if we wrap around, you can see there is a lot of difference between these two wheels. There is advantage in one, there is disadvantage in the other. If we continue with the difference between these two wheels, if you are a bit more short of budget, and when I say this is a bit wrong, because these two wheels are not cheap whatsoever, but this one you'll be buying something around 2000 and something. Here you are going for 3,800, so it's much more expensive to jump to something like the Inmotion V14 50S. There is also a massive difference between these two that makes me think that they are completely in a different league. So when we look to this wheel, it continues to give me the vibe and the fun that I have with electric unicycles. I really feel that I'm riding electric unicycles. But when you look to an Inmotion V14 50S, it really feels that it's not an extension of my body anymore. I have to respect what I have between my legs. Plus, it really feels that I'm riding, basically going around with the motorbike. Not comparable. When we talk about range, they can do similar things, but because you have much more torque with the V14 Vs compared to the V11Y, you can do obviously a little bit more, because here you have 1500 watts and here you have 2200. Even if you can do the same kind of range, when you are trying to come back with this wheel, you already feel limited, but here you don't feel it. It just continue to go. Obviously, also when we talk about battery quality, you have here 50S batteries, there you don't. So also if you are looking to safety and fires and stuff like that, obviously I believe that you'll be safer with the Inmotion V14 Vs. But when we talk about safety, both of them comes with smart BMS. Something that I have to say that I prefer much more on this wheel is the backlight is so much bigger, but I really like the position of the backlight on the V14, and also it seems sometimes that it's slightly stronger and brighter than that one. And because it's slightly taller, in a certain way I prefer that one, but because it's slightly taller, maybe it's a little bit more visible, but obviously I'm not the one on the back, I'm the one that is riding the wheel. But I prefer the profile and I prefer the look of it on that one than this one. I think that Inmotion could have done better on this subject on the Inmotion V14 Vs. When we talk about disassembling these wheels, I need to say that this is an old generation of wheel, even if it's the newest wheel that Inmotion, besides the E20, have released. This is a new generation, the Inmotion V14 Vs, and this is an old way of making things. To reach a tire on the Inmotion V11Y, you really need to plan that day, because it's going to take you ages. And when we go here, you just have to take one of the battery packs from one of the sides on the back, and you'll be able to reach the tire. So no problem whatsoever to do that on this wheel. But I think that Inmotion can do even better. I would like to see the fact that I can disconnect everything without having to go to my motherboard. But obviously that is the fact that Inmotion wants to make it completely sealed, so no risk to go water on the inside. Something to consider, but obviously to disassemble one and the other, you'll feel much better with the Inmotion V14 Vs than with the Inmotion V11Y. When we talk about the rim is reinforced on the V14 and is not on the V11Y, so that obviously will be a point to the V14 Vs. Last but not least, inside these wheels you have Raptor control boards. They are insanely good and you feel very, very safe. Like I said, I think that Inmotion have put too much safety towards the V11Y, because I didn't felt that type of cutting of speeds happening on the end of my trips with the V11. So definitely something that I would like, maybe by software, that Inmotion can basically sort it out on the V11Y. But both of them have Raptor controllers. In here is the Raptor Y, and here is obviously the controls, the most powerful controls that you have from Inmotion. But both of them, they makes me feel safe no matter if I'm charging them or if I'm riding. Soon I'll be doing my full review of the Inmotion V14 Vs if you want, or I'll be able to do other type of comparisons, but let me know in the comments below which one you would like to see.